I'd like to just begin on the tariff conversation before we get into defense. You've been at it for a long while. You were spared from the sort of tariff unveil yesterday. However, you have now retaliated. I'd like to just talk to you about your approach and how to deal with Donald Trump and these tariffs.
Well, let's be very honest. Let's be clear. Tariffs are taxes on Americans. So I think this will affect their wallets. This will affect their capacity of having access to great opportunities and better lives for their kids. Why? Because fundamentally, when you look at it, when the U.S. imposes tariffs on countries, well, of course we retaliate like we did. At this point, we're more than $60 billion worth of retaliation on American goods. And we know that Canada is the biggest client of the U.S. We buy more from the U.S. and from American businesses, and particularly small and medium-sized businesses, than France, the U.K., China, and Japan combined. So in that sense, this will hurt Americans. So that's why we launched an ad campaign across the U.S., particularly in red states, saying that tariffs are a tax on hardworking Americans.
And what has your contact been now with the Trump administration? I know it's been enduring for many, many months, but since the sort of reveal of these tariffs, are you making any progress? Are the negotiations live right now?
Well, we're right now in an electoral campaign back home, so the Prime Minister and the President agreed that they would be talking after the election. But what I can tell you is I had some constructive discussions with the Secretary of State. We have a very productive working relationship, Marco Rubio and I. We speak to each other often, and we agreed that on things we disagree, we can even still continue to talk. Because our strategy is clear. We're putting maximum pressure on the Trump administration to pull back on any form of tariffs. We are at this point under many tariffs, some on steel and aluminum, on auto, and on part of our economy as well. And at the same time, you know, my job as the head of diplomacy in Canada is to make sure ultimately that we find off-ramps.
Yeah, but I think the sort of at the fundamental base of the philosophy behind what the Trump administration is doing is this idea that the United States has been aggrieved in a major way on the international stage on the question of trade. And so that being said, there's also all this talk that they're talking about basically non-tariff barriers. So is it clear to you, do you have an understanding of how you sort of can have an exchange rate, so-called, between a tariff rate that the U.S. has imposed and these non-sort of tariff barriers that they're trying to change? Do you have a clear idea of what they want and how to approach that kind of negotiation?
No, I think the only strategy the U.S. is putting on the table right now is they want to have strong hands every time they're negotiating with countries, and they want to do bilateral deals. What is clear is the president wants to do a global reset on trade, and it's his vision to do so. I've had conversations with Secretary Rubio about that, and the question is how much political capital is President Trump willing to spend on a recession? Because we know that this will hurt the economy. We saw markets tanking yesterday, and we know that all this trade uncertainty is going to ultimately affect just consumer habits and at the same time the investment climate. So we know back in Canada that we have to invest in ourselves. We have to do more amongst our provinces and territories to make sure that there's no barriers to trade amongst us. That's the first thing. Second, we're looking to the European Union to be closer, and we're looking to partners in Asia also to be the case.
And this is my next question, because given that the Trump administration basically seems to be betting on the concept that they're the only game in town and that they will be able to get their way on all these things. This is what we've heard from the cabinet. This is what we've heard from Donald Trump. Does this sort of change your concept of how the relationship with the EU needs to be, and even the G7? Do we need to start thinking, from your perspective, of a G7 -1?
Well, so a couple of things on that. First, we know that the relationship with the U.S. Has fundamentally changed, and we take stock of that. We're the biggest, the best friend of the U.S., the best neighbor, the best partner, and we want to make sure that at the end of the day, we get to an agreement on trade, but also on security. So this will be the end game. When it comes to other partners, Canada is the most European, non-European on the planet. We've always been close to Europe. That's just part of our DNA, our history. Even the head of our state is a king in England. So our goal is to be closer to the UK, but particularly the EU. We have a free trade agreement with the EU. We want to be part of the Rearm Europe defense procurement strategy that the EU is working on. And we believe that we can offer many things to Europe and vice versa.
Are there formal steps being taken in that direction?
Yeah,
New agreements kind of getting into these programs?
Yeah, so there is a white paper that has been published by the EU on defense procurement, and we've had numerous conversations and input into that paper.
And on that question of defense, when we think about kind of the willingness of this American administration to exert influence on allies, we think about how much of everybody's defense hardware comes from the United States, how dependent that hardware is on software updates in the United States. Does it concern you to think about the administration potentially exerting pressure in that way? And would it incline you then to start thinking about sourcing some of that hardware elsewhere, particularly the EU, which is now trying to build out its industrial defense base?
Well, so we want to build our own industrial defense base. We know that we have everything when it comes to natural resources, from uranium to also energy. We know we have the best AI researchers in the world. We know we have lots of SMEs in the AI sector. We know also that we have an aerospace sector, an auto sector that ultimately leads us to have strong manufacturing capacities. So we have to create more jobs at home in investing in defense. We're over-reliant on the US. We know that. And we have the same how can I say, understanding as Europeans of the necessity to become a bit more independent when it comes to defense. Now, at the same time, we know that the industrial capacity of the U.S. when it comes to defense is really difficult to change overnight. So we'll continue to find ways to work together, albeit all these difficult times these days. But at the same time, we know we have to pivot, and that's what we'll be doing.
And I think that many of the people listening to Marco Rubio yesterday within Europe, within NATO, were very reassured by the message that the Secretary of State had, which was basically a full-throated commitment to NATO, but a NATO that is spending more on its own defense and taking it more seriously. He reiterated once again that 5% target on defense spend. He, in fact, suggested that the U.S., for the first time, will spend 5% of their GDP on defense. Is that a figure that is realistic for Canada to achieve, and on what timeline? So
the U.S. is at 3.2 at this point, so they're still very far for 5%. We also know that the ultimate and only decision maker in the American system is the president himself. So we look forward to be constructive for the next NATO summit, which is coming in The Hague. We need to make sure that that summit is a success. Canada will be meeting its defense spending targets. Canada will also invest, as I said, more in creating jobs at home in the sector. And we know that, yes, we have to invest more in NATO, but fundamentally in Canada, we need to invest more in us, in our own continental security, in our own Arctic. And also we've been saying, and I've been saying at the table of NATO now for 3.5 years, we need to concentrate on what's going on in the Indo-Pacific and in China, with China's involvement across the Indo-Pacific. That's really, really important. And many of our European friends see Russia as a threat. We see Russia as a threat as well. At the same time, Russia is working with China in the Arctic, so we have to take stock of that. And also, China is extremely, its behavior is extremely preoccupying in the Indo-Pacific, and Europeans need to take stock of that. And you've just spent 24 hours basically with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, here in Brussels. Can you just give us a picture of what those conversations contained and what you took away from them? So when speaking with Secretary Rubio, we talk about just our political reality at home. Both of us. We talk about tariffs, of course, and what are the next steps regarding tariffs. We talk about just overall security. And we talk about the fact that we need to get to a good deal on Ukraine, on the Middle East. We talk a lot about our own hemisphere also, Haiti and Venezuela, for example.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Melanie
Thank you.
Joly, the Canadian Foreign Minister there, addressing everything from, of course, tariffs, which has basically eclipsed every conversation, I think, for the last 48 or so hours, but, of course, European defense and the future of NATO.